It's gold and silver for the brilliant Brownlees in Brazil. A second successive triumph in the triathlon for Alistair, and this time his brother was right behind. Brothers in arms at the finish, exhausted but victorious.
Also tonight, rescued from the rubble, the young boy whose picture sums up the horror of Syria.
Fat chance of success, Jamie Oliver's verdict on the government's obesity strategy.
Do you want 2 fees? And celebrating success, a record number of students heading to university.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. It's one of the great British stories of an Olympics that's already full of them. Two brothers who lived together, trained together and raced together are tonight celebrating together. It's gold and silver for the Brownlees in the triathlon, one of the most gruelling Olympic events. This was unfinished business for Alistair and Jonathan. 4 years ago in London, it was gold and bronze.
And after obliterating their rivals with the Brownlee 1-2, the two brothers fell into a victory embrace at the finishing line. A victory crowning another great Olympic day for Britain. Our sports editor Steve Scott reports from Rio.
The Olympic triathlon champion for the second time.
Not quite brothers in arms, they had nothing left to give, but still a special bond at a very special moment, there for all to see. Alistair retaining his title, Johnny mere seconds behind for a family 1-2. There are few Olympic cities easier on the eye than Rio, a natural amphitheatre and an Olympic stage the Brownlee brothers intended to dominate just as they did in 2012. Like shoals of angry sharks thrashing through the surf, the Brownlees kept pace with the pack. Once on the bike, though, they made their move, driving the leading group and opening up a huge gap ahead of those trailing behind. In the 10K section, they were dominant too. Alistair, so dominant, he had the luxury of celebrating long before the finish line. And it was a strong finish that gave Liam Heath and John Schofield silver in the double kayak.
Heath and Schofield move up, level in second position.
Their paddle-powered torpedo crossing second to improve on their bronze in London 4 years ago.
To be at my first overseas games was really special, and Rio put on a great show. Couldn't ask for a better location than we've just raced in, and then the medal's just icing on the cake.
So exactly how does Olympic silver rank as an achievement?
It's right up there. It really is. You know, on par with my marriage last year. So you know, it's really up there.
Britain's women's hockey team have made history and are guaranteed at least silver. They're through to their first ever final after overwhelming New Zealand. In their gold medal showdown, they face the Dutch, winners of the last 3 Olympic titles. Britain's athletics captain Adam Jamili has raced into the 200 metres final as a fastest loser. The favourite for gold found qualifying altogether less stressful, even having time for a chat along the way. There's laid back, and then there's Usain Bolt.
And Steve, I gather there's been even more success for Team GB today.
Yes, that's right, Mark. More history to report. Marcus Ellis and Chris Langridge have just won Britain's first ever Olympic badminton medal. They got a bronze. The sailing finally got underway. The weather was right today, and we got a confirmation of gold for Hannah Mills and Saskia Clark, the gold we all knew that was coming. Nicola Adams has just won in the last half hour. She's through to the final in the boxing, so she's guaranteed at least a silver. And Jade Jones is looking pretty strong for gold in the taekwondo. That's later tonight.
All right, Steve, thank you very much indeed.
Well, it caused quite a stir when 4 American gold medal swimmers announced that they'd been mugged at gunpoint in Rio and robbed of their money. But today, those 4 swimmers have been accused by the authorities in Brazil of making the story up.
Yes, it's claimed they were trying to explain away a drunken confrontation at a petrol station. The details from our correspondent John Ray in Rio.
From gold medal glory to national disgrace, Ryan Lochtey's downfall has been swift and public. So too, 3 fellow members of America's victorious swimming team, 2 of whom, Jack Conger and Gunnar Bentz, were hauled off their flight home late last night.
Where you robbed? Where you guys robbed? Tell us, where you robbed? Was there a robbery? Wasn't it? Or was it just a good time? Ryan Lochtey is sticking to the story. Are you guys saying the same thing?
As Brazilian police began to question one of the most dramatic off-field events of the Games. After this celebratory night out, Lochtey said their taxi ride home came to a violent halt with a robbery at gunpoint by men posing as police who forced them to the ground.
And the guy pulled out his gun, he cocked it, put it to my forehead, he said, "Get down," and I was like, I put my hands up, I was like, whatever. He took our money, he took my wallet.
It happened at this petrol station, but CCTV shows no such confrontation. Instead, police say the swimmers smashed a bathroom door. They were stopped from leaving by a security guard. 3 of the team are seen sitting on the floor. At one point, 2 raise their hands in surrender. And so it seems the swimmers were not, after all, the victims of a terrifying armed robbery. Instead, this is a story about a row over a damaged toilet door at a petrol station. The police believe that first version was simply a lie. Lochtey is safely back in the US, but here the security threat is real, and police are angry at having to investigate a crime that never happened. John Ray, ITV News, Rio.
Now, he is sitting alone in an ambulance, covered in dust and seemingly dazed with shock. He has been pulled from the rubble of his home after an airstrike on the city of Aleppo. The picture of 5-year-old Omran has brought pleas from around the world for a halt to the bombardment of the besieged eastern part of the city. And a warning, Emma Murphy's report on Aleppo's suffering children contains images you may find upsetting.
There are many front lines in Syria's war. Last night, Omran Daknish's home became one of them. Attacked from the skies, it collapsed upon him. Somehow he's survived, but at what cost? His hair matted with the dust from his home, his face caked in his own blood. He's left alone in the ambulance. There's no one to hold his hand here, and at 5 years old he doesn't even cry. He just pats his little face and wipes the blood on the seat as he tries to work out what's happened. He isn't alone for long. The tragedy is that those who keep him company are just as young and equally traumatised. This part of eastern Aleppo is a stronghold of anti-Assad sentiment. And these airstrikes are viewed here as retribution because rebels broke through a government siege 10 days ago. An informant had warned that a jet had taken off from one of the Russian bases. 2 minutes later, there were 2 airstrikes. This footage, filmed for ITV News in the last 48 hours, shows the reality of life in besieged Aleppo. This is the consequence of another air attack. The staff in what's left of the hospitals struggling to treat the children brought in so dreadfully harmed. We are told these children were hit by shrapnel when a cluster bomb was dropped in the street close to where they lived. The desperation of medical staff is evident. This is why they want a ceasefire and the creation of a UN humanitarian corridor to get the most injured out.
We don't want any aid. We don't want medical supplies. We want this bombing and chilling to stop. That's the only thing that's what we want.
The physical pain of the injuries inflicted on such little bodies is all too evident. Awful to see, almost unbearable to hear. And yet it is the silent injuries, the harm done to young minds, which will likely linger longer than the scars. Put yourselves in our place, this father says. These are kids. Don't you feel anything? Can't the world wake up? Where is your conscience? Our blood is pouring in the streets. Little Omran is the latest child to be held up as an example of Syria's plight. But perhaps the great tragedy is that there are many more, too dreadfully harmed for us to show.
I mean, Emma, appalling images, very difficult to watch, actually. Is there anything that the UN can do at this stage?
Well, the UN have been trying without a great deal of success now for a number of years, and it gives you an indication of just how futile the situation feels to them, that after 8 minutes this morning, the Special Envoy actually just scrapped the meeting that he was in of the humanitarian bodies and just said, we haven't been able to get aid through for all this time. We need to wait a week. We need to see where we get to. He has called for a 48-hour ceasefire. That would help. That's what those on the ground in those hospitals are calling for, but it's incredibly difficult. Just think about all the players that we have here. We have the regime, we have Russia, we have rebels, we have Islamist forces. To try and get all of those to actually come together is virtually impossible. There have been some small ceasefires apparently over the last few days, but we were told by those in Aleppo that actually the fighting was worse during those 3-hour breaks.
OK, Emma, thank you.
Here, 2 police officers are under criminal investigation over the death of a former Premier League footballer.
Dalian Atkinson, who played for Aston Villa, died after West Mercia police used a taser on him during a disturbance in Telford. An inquiry into his death by the Independent Police Complaints Commission is still underway.
The TV chef Jamie Oliver didn't mince his words today in condemning the government's long-awaited plan for tackling childhood obesity. The strategy, he said, was underwhelming with so much missing. The government was forced to deny its plan had been watered down to include voluntary schemes rather than measures like compulsory curbs on junk food advertising. Our political correspondent Paul Brand has more.
For a third of children in Britain right now, this is a familiar fight. But as they tried to shift some weight in Ipswich this morning, the government confirmed it's slimmed down the obesity strategy that was supposed to help these children with their battles.
I do put a lot of thought into what I eat, and I always look at the calories and everything else in them and make sure it's not something too bad.
I think I'm a bit overweight a bit, and I would kind of like to get more energetic and exercising.
To help, the government will go ahead with a tax on sugary drinks, as already promised, and schools will have to make sure children get an hour of exercise a day, while companies will be asked to reduce sugar in many foods by 20%. But crucially, that will be voluntary, and there are no new regulations around advertising junk food aimed at children or shops offering deals on sugary products, adding up to much disappointment.
I think there's much more that could have been done, but in the long term, some of this will make a difference. So like trying to take some of the sugar out of products over a long period of time. But unfortunately, there's no compulsion. So, I would like to see much tougher regulation backing this up.
When a tax on sugary drinks was first announced in March, many had hoped more action would follow.
I think this was a big, bold, brave, unconventional move.
But today, Jamie Oliver wrote, "I'm in shock. With this disappointing and frankly underwhelming strategy, the health of our future generations remains at stake." As does David Cameron's legacy. His government spent years on this strategy. Ministers deny his replacements watered it down.
To say that's not ambitious, to say that's not a big ask of our industry, our manufacturers, our retailers, is not the case. It is a big ask, but we think we can do it.
Note, she's a former health minister. The health secretary and prime minister both on holiday. Many suspect the new regime's just not up for this particular fight. Paul Brand, ITV News, Westminster.
Still to come in the ITV Evening News, making the grade. More A-level students head to university.
And a warning for holidaymakers why your pound is worth €1 or less at some currency exchanges. Those stories and more right after the break.
Regret. Hello again, welcome back. A-level results day in England, Wales and Northern Ireland brought its usual annual clutch of delighted and some dejected teenagers today. It also brought a new record. More students than ever before have been offered university places. And another phenomenon seems on the increase. The freebies and inducements dangled in front of students to take up those places. Nina Nanar reports from Sheffield.
You've got 2 Bs! They're not the only ones jumping for joy today.
I'm so happy. I did not expect.
Their hard work has paid off, and now competition for their future in higher education has never been fiercer.
And I'm off to York St John's to do a history degree. Quite excited because I'm the first one in my family to go to university.
And I just feel relieved, to be honest. I feel happy that all my hard work's paid off.
If proof were needed of the demand for university places this year, it's right here at the Clearing Centre for Sheffield University. There are an unprecedented number of people taking calls, and already after just a few hours, a record number of students chasing places.
In fact, 424,000 students are being offered places this year. That's 3% up on last year. And incentive schemes are being used to attract the best of them and extra funding. Sheffield University offers free master's degrees to top achieving students. City University in London has a scholarship worth £3,000 a year. And De Montfort University gives away free tickets to see Premier League champions Leicester City.
We're trying to fit the students to the courses. That has to be right. It would be very easy to say, here's a gimmick, come along, and then the student hates it, or it doesn't fit with the course. That would be very, very unfair, and that's what we try and avoid. And I think most places do, to be honest.
Was it law that you were looking to apply for?
With the removal of a cap on student numbers at English universities and a decline in the number of 18-year-olds, would-be graduates this year are shopping around like never before. Nina Nanar, ITV News in Sheffield.
Pauline Kafaki, who contracted Ebola while working as a nurse in Africa, is facing disciplinary action. It's alleged she concealed her high temperature when giving answers to medical staff on her return to the UK.
Now, arguments still rage about the consequences of the Brexit vote, but if you're about to change your holiday money, you could be in for a nasty shock.
Yes, especially if you left it to the last minute before going abroad, because in some places you'll get less than €1 to every pound. Our consumer editor Chris Choi reports.
Just as millions need travel spending money, many will get much less of it. At Britain's airports, currency exchange rates made depressing holiday reading today. Here, £1 got you just €1.
It makes it expensive when you're going abroad on holidays and things like that. It's a bit of a killer, really.
I think you're more conscious of it when you're there and you're spending the money when you're there. I think you really got to think about how much it's costing at home.
Our survey of airports shows some travellers now getting less than €1 per pound. The rate at the ICE Exchange Bureau at Edinburgh Airport is 99 cents. At Stansted Monaco, it's €1 for a pound. At Heathrow with Travelex, it's just a shade above £1 for €1. At Manchester with ICE, it's the same rate. It's all a big dip from last year when you could get €1.42 for a pound. Come somewhere like this on the high street and you do get a significantly better rate. But the currency firms say that many customers value the convenience of exchanging just before they fly. But of course, that comes at a price. Firms say it's because overheads are higher at the airport and that they also offer improved deals for people buying in advance. But the low rates have led to a consumer warning.
We found that for €1,000 over the course of a typical week's holiday, you can actually be £122 worse off by buying currency at the airport, as opposed to some of the better options, which include credit cards and prepaid cards.
The holiday spending money you get doesn't just depend on where you go on holiday, but also where you go for your currency. Chris Choi, ITV News.
And for the top 5 tips on how best to get the most for your money, then go to our website, itv.com/news.
And finally tonight, we end with another view of the story. We started with the Brownlee brothers' emphatic victory in the Olympic triathlon and how they might inspire future generations.
In their native Yorkshire, a fan zone was organised in Leeds so their supporters could cheer them on. And perhaps, as Ian Payne reports, the Brownlees of tomorrow were among them.
At the fan zone in Leeds city centre, home of the Brownlees, their 1-2 finish was greeted with glee, relief and pride. And part of the crowd beside the man-made beach, members of the country's junior triathlon club, the future Brownlees in effect, all inspired by the brothers.
Oh, it's amazing, just seeing them up there doing that, knowing that they train around the streets of Leeds, it's just incredible.
It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, all of us here with Triathlon England have all got dreams, and that's the ultimate dream. And to see that the Brownies have delivered and came 1-2 is absolutely fantastic to see.
The Brownlees have been training for this for years. They've been champions and rivals since youngsters. And they came to national attention with a gold and a bronze at London 2012.
30 metres to go.
The brothers will no doubt hope they can inspire those even further down the line. And alongside the big screen, the Triathlon Trust are doing just that with the very youngest on 2 wheels. So the future does look bright.
We're able to support in the region of 200 athletes, all under the ages of 18, 19. So that's an even split of females and males. So we're doing our best to look after young athletes, young people in the sport, and we're able to do that because of what the success of a lot of the top guys have brought the sport.
It's yet another example of how Olympic success is nurturing the shoots of future champions and beyond. Ian Payne, ITV News, Leeds.
Don't know what sport that is.
Quite some family.
Yeah, marvellous.
That's it for now. Tom Bradby is here at 10.
But from all the team here on the Evening News, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.